The tension in the air was suffocating. The alley, lined with worn brick walls and flickering streetlights, became the silent stage for an impending storm. Standing at the center of it all was Kwon Dagon, his posture calm but radiating fury, his fists hanging low but ready to strike. Across from him, towering with a smug grin plastered on his thick face, stood Min Kwon, one of the largest and most feared delinquents from Bongun Technical School. The whispers among the students, watching from behind, were full of confidence. They spoke of Min Kwon as if he were a legend. His massive body, honed from years of street fights, was often enough to intimidate opponents before a punch was even thrown. They had seen him crush challengers with ease, tossing aside fighters like broken mannequins. And now, facing this newcomer, they fully expected the same. But Kwon Dagon wasn't like anyone they had seen. Min Kwon couldn't stop talking. His voice filled the alley, taunting and belittling, trying to provoke a reaction. It was a common tactic, psychological warfare before fists were thrown, but Kwon Dagon had no patience for empty words. Annoyed and unamused, he fired back a sharp, cold retort. It wasn't loud, but it was piercing enough to sting. It hit harder than expected. Min Byung-kwon's confidence twisted into anger. With a loud grunt, he stepped forward, his feet cracking against the pavement as he charged. But his momentum came to a sudden, humiliating stop. Kwon Dagon, without so much as flinching, reached out and locked him in an American grip. His arm coiled around Byung-kwon's neck like a vice, lifting his massive body with terrifying control. In seconds, the fight was over. The biggest threat among them collapsed, subdued without resistance. Gasps erupted. What they thought would be a one-sided victory had turned into a swift and brutal defeat. But Kwon Dagon wasn't done. His rage simmered beneath his still exterior. This ambush was not just cowardly, it was disgraceful. They had involved people who had nothing to do with him. They dragged in the innocent, all to satisfy their pride. That line had been crossed. Then came the next wave. Dozens of students began to encircle him. The alley narrowed with the sheer number of feet moving into formation. The noise died down, replaced by the eerie silence of footsteps and determined breathing. It was clear they had a strategy. If brute strength failed, numbers would overwhelm. One couldn't guard every direction at once. The ring tightened. Kwon Dagon scanned every face, every twitch, every breath. His fists clenched. His legs shifted. He knew what was coming. And then they came. The second wave of students from Bongun surged forward. More bodies, more fists, more fury. Kwon Dagon moved like a machine. Every punch he threw was a calculated burst of power, every movement sharp and efficient. But even he was human. The pressure began to show. There were too many, too fast, too close. A punch grazed his side. A kick clipped his leg. Blood surged through his veins like fire. Then came salvation. From behind the crowd, new voices broke. Through the chaos, Kim Min-soo appeared first, pushing through the mob with his usual timid yet determined expression. Behind him came Minho, brash and loud as always, followed by others who had come to respect Kwon Dagon, those who had once fought him and now chose to fight beside him. Without hesitation, they dove into the fray. The crowd split, fists clashed, shoes scraped. The alley turned into a full-blown battlefield, chaotic and unforgiving. Kwon Dagon, bloodied and breathing hard, felt the tide begin to turn. He was no longer alone, and that changed everything. He moved again, striking faster, harder, sharper, his fury now fueled by unity. He dodged the attacks more cleanly. He countered with precision. Around him, his allies held their ground. Every punch thrown by Kim Min-soo, every kick from Minho, reminded him that strength wasn't just in fist, was in those who stood beside you still. The enemy was relentless, but so was he. And in that dark, narrow alley where chaos reigned, Kwon Dagon carved out his place not just as a fighter, but as the force that no one, not even dozens of delinquents, could take down without paying the price. The moment Minho appeared in the chaos-filled alley, everyone, friend and foe, alike froze in confusion. Kwon Dagon, bloodied and breathing hard, turned his head in disbelief. He hadn't expected backup beyond Kim Min-soo and the others. The timing was too perfect, too precise. It was as if Minho had known exactly what would happen, and he had. Behind Minho stood his crew, each carrying a different kind of crude weapon: iron pipes, monkey wrenches, even brass knuckles glinting under the flickering streetlight. It was a menacing sight, but to Kwon-daegan it felt more like a lifeline. The mystery unraveled quickly. It was Ginmo who had made it all possible, despite his timid appearance. Despite being seen as nothing more than a follower, Ginmo had taken the risk. Using subtle signals, he had informed Kim Min-soo of the ambush, who in turn contacted Minho. It was a desperate gamble, but Ginmo knew there was no turning back. He had reached the end of the road. He no longer belonged anywhere, not with Kim Won-woong, not with the weak, not with the strong. So he made his choice, and he chose to stop being a coward. His betrayal enraged the Bangun gang. Shouts of anger erupted as they realized that someone from their own side had turned against them. The betrayal was personal, but Ginmo stood firm. For the first time, he wasn't hiding behind anyone. He didn't care what would happen to him. He had made up his mind. Minho, smiling with a spark of recklessness, ordered Kwon-daegan to take on the two gang leaders however he liked. Meanwhile, Minho and his crew would handle the small fry. Kwon-daegan gave a small nod of appreciation. The street lit up with violence once more. Minho went in first. True to his styler, dirty fighter who didn't believe in rules or honor, he threw dust into his opponent's eyes, kicked between their legs, bit, scratched, elbowed, whatever it took. He didn't care about appearances. He fought to win. His crew followed his example, releasing their pent-up rage in waves of destruction. Every pipe swing, every punch, every stomp was an expression of chaos. On the other side of the battlefield, Kwon-daegan turned his attention to his opponents, Lee Jung-man and Chae Jin-woo, the two leaders who had been waiting for this moment. Lee Jung-man, confident in his grappling expertise, believed the fight was already his. He charged forward using a wrestling takedown technique, aiming to drag Kwon-daegan to the ground and end the fight before it began. But his confidence was misplaced. Kwon-daegan countered the takedown with ease, halting the momentum with brutal precision just as he braced himself for a follow-up. Cha Jin-woo struck from behind, delivering a sharp kick. The moment Kwon shifted focus to him, Lee Jung-man wrapped himself around Kwon from behind, locking in a crushing hold. His arms tightened like iron chains, squeezing with full force. He grinned, thinking it was over. His grip was solid. His positioning was perfect. He believed no one could break free from it. But Kwon-daegan wasn't like anyone he had fought before, despite the pressure. Kwon remained calm, his expression unchanged, his eyes steady, as if the crushing hold was nothing more than a minor inconvenience. The panic hadn't come yet, but it would, because Kwon-daegan was only getting started. The air was thick with tension. The sounds of distant shouts and footsteps from the nearby streets, drowned by the brutal chaos unfolding in the alley. Kwon-daegan stood tall, his breathing steady, eyes sharp, even as Lee Jung-man, the massive grappler from Bongin Technical School, had already locked his arms tightly around Kwon's waist from behind. It was the perfect setup for a back suplex. Lee Jung-man was confident. His weight, strength, and grappling mastery had overwhelmed countless opponents in the past. To him, once an enemy was caught in this position, it was over. He pulled with full force, aiming to slam Kwon-daegan onto the hard concrete. But Kwon wasn't just another opponent. As he felt his center of gravity shifting, Kwon scanned the environment. In a split-second decision, he extended his leg backward and pressed hard against the nearby wall. Using that pressure, he halted the suplex midair and flipped the balance in his favor. Instead of being slammed, Kwon twisted his hips and arms, lifting Lee Jung-man off his own feet and hurling the larger boy over his shoulder. Lee Jung-man crashed to the ground with a loud thud. The floor shook. Dust rose before Kwon could follow up. With a finishing blow, a foot flew toward his side fast and clean. It was Cha Jin-woo. His timing was perfect. As Kwon turned, another kick met his ribs, then a third to the thigh. Cha Jin-woo moved like a trained martial artist. Every motion was crisp and calculated. Kwon-daegan recognized it instantly. Taekwondo kind that wasn't learned for self-defense. but for real combat. For the next minute, the alley turned into a battlefield of rhythm and violence. Kwon blocked what he could, ducked what he couldn't, and absorbed several solid hits. The pressure kept coming. Ijung Man, recovering from the reversal, rejoined the assault. He lunged forward, wrapping Kwon from behind once more, trying to trap him with raw power, while Jinwoo darted in and out, launching attacks from the front. Their coordination wasn't perfect, but it was good enough to pose a threat. It was the first time in this fight Kwon Dogan felt slightly pushed back, but it didn't last. Kwon wasn't just reacting, he was calculating, watching, learning. The weakness became clear. Cha Jinwoo's attacks were effective, but repetitive. His combos always ended the same, and he relied too heavily on Ijung Man creating openings. Kwon Dagon shifted his focus. He moved forward, breaking Ijung Man's grip with sheer force and turning toward Jinwoo with terrifying speed. He closed the distance and delivered a brutal blow fist to ribs. Jinwoo stumbled, the wind knocked out of him. Then came the second hit-tan, uppercut, so strong it lifted Jinwoo off his feet before sending him crashing to the ground. Jinwoo lay motionless for a moment, dazed. His eyes fluttered as consciousness threatened to abandon him. Ijung Man quickly knelt beside him, supporting his teammate before his body went completely limp. Kwon Dagon stood tall again, his chest rising and falling with quiet intensity. The next moment, Cha Jinwoo stirred and tried to stand, but Kwon didn't hesitate. He stepped in and threw a final punch clean, direct, brutal. It struck Jinwoo across the face, and this time, the boy didn't move again. His body dropped completely, eyes shut. Silence fell. Now, only one obstacle remained. Ijung Man, who had once been so confident, so sure of victory, was left alone. And Kwon Dagon didn't look tired. He looked ready. The alley was quiet now, but tension still hung in the air. Dust floated gently, the aftermath of chaos settling slowly. Only one person remained, standing across from Kwon Dagon Ijung Man. His breathing was shallow, his arms trembling. He looked at the fallen bodies of his teammates Cha Jinwoo, unconscious, and the rest of the Bongan gang, scattered in defeat. Fear began to rise in his chest, clashing with the last fragments of pride that still held him upright. He knew he couldn't win. Deep down Ijung Man understood that, but still, he wasn't ready to give up without doing anything. Gathering the last of his strength and resolve, he lowered his body and lunged forward, launching another tackle, the same move he had always relied on. But Kwon Dagon had seen this before. Too many times, he didn't flinch. With brutal precision, he timed his punch perfectly, smashing it into Ijung Man's temple as he rushed forward. The hit stopped Ijung Man in his tracks, his knees buckled, and his body collapsed to the ground. Kwon didn't let it end there. He climbed onto Ijung Man's chest, pinning him down, and began to throw punch after punch. Brutal, cold, repetitive. His fists pounded into Ijung Man's face and ribs, one after another. Blood splattered across the pavement. The boy underneath gasped and writhed, overwhelmed and helpless between the punches. Ijung Man cried out that he surrendered, but Kwon didn't care. His expression didn't change. His fists didn't slow down. Finally, he wrapped his arm around Ijung Man's neck in an American grip tight, choking, full of intent. He leaned in closer and, with his voice sharp and deadly, made it clear that anyone who dared interfere, anyone who chose to step into his path, would meet the same fate. And then, as Ijung Man's consciousness faded, his body went limp. The fight was over. At the same time, behind them, the brawl involving Minho and his gang was also coming to an end. Their enemies lay scattered across the alley, groaning or unconscious. Minho stood tall, his knuckles bloodied but his smirk still on his face. Minsu adjusted his broken glasses beside him. Kwon Dagon turned back, toward them, and gave a quiet nod. He was grateful. For once he had people who stood beside him. He thanked Minho and Minsu sincerely for helping him and for stepping in when he needed them most. Then, he turned to Gina and Ara, both of whom had been caught in the middle of something they had never wanted any part in. He apologized, genuinely. But Gina didn't accept the apology. She was furious. She lashed out at everyone, scolding them for their behavior. Her voice shook with emotion as she berated them, telling them they were all like children, solving everything with fists, choosing violence over responsibility. The way she spoke silenced everyone. It cut through the thick air more sharply than any punch, and without waiting for a response, Gina turned and walked away, her steps heavy with frustration and pain. But behind her anger, she carried a weight of her own, a burden that none of them fully understood. She had a younger sibling who lay sick in the hospital, and she was the only one left to support that child. The medical bills were endless, and, as cruel as fate could be, that child was a victim of Ilgin too. She had seen too much, been through too much. Elsewhere, away from the bloody alley, in a dim side street, Ginmo and Cha Jinwoo, both bruised and worn, approached Kim Won-wong. But this wasn't a reunion. This wasn't respect. Jinmo's face twisted with anger, his fists clenched. The pain, the humiliation, the betrayal he had endured for following Won-wong's orders burned in his chest like fire. And now, he was ready to unleash it. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows on the concrete walls behind the school. The air was unusually still when Jinmo and his three companions approached Kim Won-wong. The air between them was heavy, something unspoken hanging in the tension. Wong tilted his head slightly, confused by their sudden presence. His face remained calm, but his eyes scanned them cautiously. He couldn't understand why they were all standing together, stiff, silent, and serious. Then Jinmo reached into his pocket. His fingers curled slowly into a fist as he brought his hand out, knuckles tightening with purpose. At that moment, Won-wong understood. It wasn't a conversation, it was retribution before he could react. The four of them charged him together. The first blow landed clean, then another, then a kick. Won-wong gritted his teeth and fought back, landing a few hits of his own. His fists still had strength. His rage hadn't cooled, but it was 4 against 1. The beating became overwhelming. There was no space to breathe, no room to escape. Won-wong stumbled back, attempting to flee, but they chased him relentlessly, blow after blow, punch after kick. His pride shattered under the weight of their fury. One of them recorded everything. Somewhere else, in the quiet halls of a hospital, Gina sat beside a bed. Her younger sibling lay motionless beneath the white sheets, a small hand wrapped in bandages. Machines beeped softly around them. Her expression was solemn, but her eyes burned with something darker. Vengeance. Her voice was quiet, but it carried weight. Whoever had done this, whoever had laid a hand on her sibling would pay the price. It didn't matter who. The pain they caused would be returned tenfold. The next day at school, a new dynamic began to form. With Won-wong having fallen from power, a shift had taken place. The leadership of Class 1 to 6 had changed. Now Jinmo, along with his 3 friends, held control. The weight of power sat on Jinmo's shoulders for the first time, and it showed in his posture, his tone, the way he carried himself. He looked more confident, but that confidence crumbled the moment Kwon Daegan stepped into the classroom. Everything stopped. Every student turned toward the door as Kwon entered calmly, like a quiet storm building strength. His eyes locked onto Jinmo, unblinking. He walked straight toward him and asked a simple question. Did Jinmo want to get beaten again, or would he prefer to fight as equals? Jinmo didn't answer. He didn't try to escape. He simply stood still and lowered his head slightly, accepting whatever was to come. Kwon's fist moved like lightning. The blow landed squarely. Jinmo's body lifted from the ground, almost weightless, and crashed back down like a rag doll. He didn't get up. Silence followed. Then Kwon Daegan turned to the rest of the class. His voice was calm, but it carried command. He declared that there would be no more gangs, no more groups, no more power games. From now on, they were to live peacefully. No more fighting for control. No more dominance. Then he left. By now, Kwon had established dominance over 5 classes, excluding Class 1 to 5. His presence cast a long shadow, and even those who once mocked him now kept their heads low. Later that day, Minho Minsu and another one of their friends celebrated Kwon's rise. They laughed, praising him loudly, proud of what he had achieved. But in typical Kwon fashion, he didn't smile back. He simply slapped all three of them calmly and firmly scolding them for disturbing his focus while he was trying to study. Meanwhile, in another classroom, Suzy Beek sat with Jiseok. They had been trying to contact Wong, but he hadn't shown up at school. Not today. Not yesterday. Suzy, still frustrated, crossed her arms. A part of her felt something deeper toward Kwon, but her pride, her anger, and her confusion blurred the line. She turned to Jiseok with a sharp suggestion. It was time to reach out to other classes. If they were going to stand a chance at defeating Kwon Dogan, they couldn't do it alone.